Welcome Home with Barbara Beck, a Good Life 45 original production. Get ready to watch hope happen.
Hi everyone, I'm Barbara Beck and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Welcome Home. Today we're going to be talking about cultural trends, which ones are good and which ones we need to combat. Our children and our homes are often at stake when the culture takes a gradual but insidious turn. And so on today's program, we have a panel of distinguished pastors who are going to be identifying some of these trends and talking about what we can do to protect our homes and families from the negative and even destructive trends that are often taking place in our culture. Our biblical reference for this topic comes from Genesis 6, where you'll remember Noah had to go against the culture. And the Bible says that Noah walked with God, and that's in spite of culture. Noah's a great example of someone who stood for truth and went against the culture. Well, that's just one example. So before we get to our panel, let's see what the current ladies have to say about cultural trends. Welcome, ladies.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, so we're going to start off a little differently today. I'm going to go down the line, and I'm just going to ask you to think of one cultural trend in your life. Doesn't have to be big. It can be serious or not serious, but something that's maybe made a difference in your life. Putting you on the spot. Kristen, you got one?
I don't know this has really made a difference in my life, but I was visiting a church this past weekend, and I only had my phone with me, and I wanted to take some notes. And so people always, I feel like lately a lot of people are using their phones or tablets as Bibles, which I don't even take my phone into normal church these days because it's a distraction to me. But I pulled out my phone and I started taking notes on my phone, and I felt so uncomfortable. People use them as Bibles all the time.
I was with you, and I really did think you were texting.
I know, and
right?
that was my concern too, was that
you were taking notes?
The minister was thinking I was on my phone. I was taking notes the entire time.
Way to go.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you.
Well, I know, but it looked like I was not paying attention.
I know, but you were. The main point.
I got good notes. So
good
I can
job.
refer to.
That's a definite.
You don't have to worry about losing them.
That's right.
It's like it keeps it, and you're saving the earth.
That's
Not
right.
using
No
paper. Come on,
Yeah,
there's
doing
something
very
That's a
environmental.
definite trend.
Yeah.
Carolyn, you got one?
Okay, mine's a little bit more serious than that, but because I love music, I will say what changed me was the worship music. My kids, like, we turn on the radio and stuff now, and I'm like, you have no idea how good you've got it, you know?
Yes.
Because when we were younger, it was just, and not that that was bad, because I still love some of those old songs, but the new worship music is just so good and so fresh, and I just love it. So for me, that's where I'm like.
But you just said you turn on the radio. Is that in the car?
Yeah.
Okay, in the car. Now, back in my day, when you turned on the radio, you took your transistor radio into the bathroom with you.
Nobody knows what a
Don't tell them
transistor radio is.
Don't go there.
Somebody out there knows what I'm talking about. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Transistor radio.
Transit, whatever that was, we had Channel 95. I don't know. I saw it on somebody's bumper sticker the other day, and I went, Channel 95, that's what I used to listen to on
Now
the radio.
we listen to Pandora.
Now, okay, Pandora,
Yeah,
Spotify. I do know some of that. All right, good one, Carolyn. Deborah, what's your cultural trend?
Well, I remember when women had to wear dresses to church.
Yes.
And one of the things that we do, particularly at my church, is you dress however you want. But particularly during the summer months, we dress casual.
Like how casual?
Which means I can get up on Sunday morning and I can put on a pair of jeans.
Wow.
And I can put on a t-shirt. We have Hope t-shirts. You've seen me, Barbara.
At the 11 o'clock service, you're going to dress like that.
At 10 o'clock.
You're 10 o'clock,
I dress in, and you can wear tennis shoes
That's great.
or heels or whatever you want.
Okay.
You can make it as dressy as you want. But the thing is, even on a regular Sunday, I don't have to wear a dress. I can wear slacks. There was a time when women couldn't do that in church. You had to wear dresses. You had to wear pantyhose.
Yeah.
In some churches, you had to wear hats, Kristen, and all of that.
I still like a
Not
hat.
anymore. So the dress for church is more casual.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I
good
fight
one.
with my boys, I will say, because sometimes I think we can go too far with it. And so sometimes they'll come out and I'll say, that just doesn't look good. Don't wear that today. Yeah,
But you wouldn't let them wear that to
because we
Bound.
still represent Jesus.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we
and
still
here's
wanna
the other
look
thing with
good.
that is that I think there are older people in church, hello, that sometimes we look at that and we go, that's not respectful because it's a house of worship and it's God's house. And I'm going to get so many good texts about this and good letters about this because I kind of still, I'm a little bit old school where I don't love flip-flops in church. And I think that because we respect God, we dress, anyway, that's just my silly old opinion.
But that's the whole thing. If that's how you feel, you can dress that way.
Yeah.
But
right.
somebody else
But don't
that
look
is
down
not
on
as-
the younger generation for doing
right.
that.
And I
think there's
appreciate
a
you
Bible
saying
verse.
that.
You think?
Yeah.
Say it.
Don't look down on those who are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in life, in love, in faith, and in purity.
So just
Don't
wow,
wear your
you whip
flip-flops.
that one out.
No,
Don't
I
wear
won't.
your
But,
flip-flops
and I'm not going to
and
look
they
down
will
on
learn
you
from
when you wear your flip-flops,
Yes.
Mo. Do you
but
wear
if my
flip-flops?
toes do not look good, don't let me wear my flip-flops, right? You gotta have good toes.
All right, so Mo, what's your cultural trend?
Okay, this is probably gonna be. Barbara, I was country when country wasn't cool. Okay.
Oh, wow. There should be a song about that.
I'm not
I think
singing it.
there is.
Think about
I
it.
think there is. But no, really, honestly, I think it was so much like what you were saying. Like music nowadays, I think is like we are so blessed with such like awesome. Of course, I like old country too, but I mean, I think like I hear all these people now like hearing like new country, new worship music, new. Yeah, our kids have some really awesome, you know, awesome stations they can listen to and that. And I kind of relate to what all of you were saying. I think at first when I would bring my phone into church, I thought I had so much people pleasing going on. I don't want them to think I'm texting. I don't want them to think. But my Bible app's on there, and I can go to the Word, go to my notes, go to this, and then I love to share my pastor's like the notes. I'll share it on Facebook quick after, just to kind of share with people.
Okay.
So it's all on here, real easy. But I had to get over my people pleasing of thinking everyone was thinking I was texting. So I kind of related to like what everybody was
And you know, the good
saying
thing
here.
is, the new generation doesn't think that.
No, they're not worried
They're
about
not
it.
even
They
worried.
know what you're doing.
They,
Right.
Yeah, they know, and some of them might still be texting, but how I feel about it is if they're in church, and that's why I appreciate
Yeah.
you bringing that
Yeah.
up, because sometimes the more mature audience doesn't understand.
Right.
But boy, I'm just so happy when those kids show up at church, that if they have a
Absolutely.
hat, if they have, just come in and get the word, because they need it.
That's
I mean,
good,
they're getting
Carolyn.
bombarded.
Right.
Out there everywhere they go with different culture than what we
Right.
as Christians
Well, let's
believe.
talk
What's
about. Go
funny?
ahead.
We have people in our church that share our services with their phone, Facebook Live. Okay? And I go back after I get home on Sunday evenings and I go back and look at those. We have had more people tuned in online on Facebook Live than we actually have present in the seats.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
It's the most amazing. You know, when you start talking technology,
Right.
yes, it's great to be able to take your notes. It's great to be able to share your notes. But you go back and look at the results of that sometimes and the number of comments you get. That is such an amazing way to spread the gospel. And there's people from all over the world that are tuned in.
Okay, so
when
there's
you're
good
online.
and there's bad about
Right,
that. What's
right.
the bad thing about that?
Oh, well, obviously, anything here on earth can be used for God's glory or Satan's glory, right? I mean, I think that's totally, but we've done the same thing on Forsaken Women. We've started Facebook and living the message. And I love it for my sisters in New York can hear me preach now. And people, you know, and you realize all these people that are tuning in and being able to watch, and our ministry has grown. It's grown because people know now what it's like and they'll come and enjoy. And I think it definitely is helpful like that. Obviously, people need to put a tight rein on their tongue on social media, because especially Christians, I think like let's, you know, watch what we're posting out there, because people are watching you and they are just studying you, and the world loves to find Christians looking dumb, because then they can, you know, have a reason why they don't want to accept Jesus. So we need to look the same on social media as we look.
Good. But what about the cultural trend of people being very happy and complacent to sit at home and watch TV?
Oh, yes.
Right? Because that could even happen with Christian television. We are so honored and really, really proud in a humble way that we can offer such great preaching through Good Life 45, but we also try to encourage people to be there in person. That is our preaching is for your second and your third and your fourth sermon of the week, and not to take the place of going to church in person. And I think that is a trend.
I actually had somebody tell me it was cheaper to stay at home. Okay. Because
Gas money to go to church? Is that why?
No, because they don't want to give and the offering and things of that nature.
That's
and
sad.
so they sit at home and they watch on TV, and that just kind of hurts my heart because I'm like,
Yes.
do you know
You're missing
what
the blessing.
Right, what you're
Right?
doing when you do that? So I think there are people that say, I'll just watch from home, or they're that kind of thing. But that's not you. So once in a while, and being able to reach people that are at home ill, that's
Absolutely.
an
That's
amazing thing.
The Bible says don't give up. Do not get in the habit of, giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing. We're supposed to be meeting together, fellowshipping
Not
together.
to forsake the assembling of ourselves
Not
together.
to forsake, yes,
Right.
don't forsake that, because that's so important. And I mean, there's nothing like that face-to-face,
Right.
Seeing people in church, like before and after church, and being able to, you actually can see when there's needs.
Do you go to church, though, now as much as you did as a kid? Because, see, when we were growing up, you went on Sunday morning, Sunday evening. You went on Wednesdays sometimes. Then you had choir practice. I mean, now I think it's real easy for people to go maybe one time a week. I mean, I know that the little tiny bit of research that I've done, church attendance is down. Regular church attendance is down.
Well, another cultural thing, if I could just throw this in. When I was growing up, and probably when you were growing up, I won't even say your kids, because I probably could be her mama. There were no athletic events for kids on Sundays. It was Saturday morning. I cannot tell you how many of our members that have children that have sporting events
really sad
on
to me.
Sunday.
I know.
Sad.
And they are all over the place, and it's
Right.
all of the
Yeah.
time. And so a lot of the choir practice and things that you did with your children when they were growing up that created that church community, it's school and it's AAU and whatever the other groups are, and those groups are having their events on Sunday morning. And so a lot of families aren't connecting in ministry or in church because they have to go, they
Right.
want their kids to get scholarships and all of that. So
Right.
they're connecting in
But
that
here's
way.
the other trend is that now you have Saturday night church, or now you have Monday night church. At least that's one thing that can combat that Sunday morning thing, because we had that too, not with you, but with Kelsey as she was coming through. She had Sunday morning tournaments all the time. And so there were ways that we could combat that by going to church on another day of the week, which is a great thing that's happened.
But I think too, we're forgetting the whole reason of the church, of not forsaking ourselves. I mean, whenever you do any kind of like self-help or life coaching or anything like that, community is such an important part to healing. There is something about when we come together. It's
Right.
that, I don't know, it's that camaraderie, it's that worship time, it's not getting out of our self-pity and feeling like we're alone, nobody loves me. It's that whole thought process that the enemy can get us in when we're alone. But I don't think it's the legalism, like you're saying, that if I'm not at church, I'm missing God somewhere. I think we're missing the whole point of what God is saying. You know what I mean? So I think for the person that is at home that can't make it to church or they can't get there one day, God's not saying, listen, you might join your family all together and have a quiet time. If you go back into the Old Testament, they didn't have churches like we have now. So, I think it's just, for me, it's just remembering why we're doing the community. You know?
That is a great segue into the next part that I want to talk about, which is connectivity. How are we connecting, and how are our children connecting verbally, socially, in every way? And everybody has said this before, we're really concerned about our kids because they're on their screens all the time, and they're texting all the time, and they're not picking up the telephone, or they're not going there in person to talk to people. So do you have concerns about your children and their social connectivity? Anybody?
Yes.
We just talked about this with Eli yesterday. He's 13, and he said he was leaving a voicemail for a friend, and he said, my friends, he goes, I always leave them because my friends pick on me because I leave voicemails. They said, Eli, nobody leaves voicemails. He goes, well, I'm going to leave a voicemail all the time. I go, that's it, baby. Be a little
great.
different.
Good.
I said, honey, and you know what? When you pull up to a friend's house, how about you don't text them, I'm here? How about you go knock on the door? Because that face-to-face communication is getting lost.
Right.
And that's so important. And, you know, I try to, it's okay. We are supposed to look a little different than the world. We are. Christians are. It's okay. You know, I never really had heard the word relevant till I worked for a church. It was like, I had never heard the word relevant. And then they have like Relevant Magazine. Are we relevant to the world? Are we relevant? It's okay. You know, it is good to, you know, make sure that the world feels comfortable coming in, but it's okay if we look a little different too. You know, John the Baptist was weird.
Yeah.
He
right.
He wore weird things.
Stuff.
He ate weird things.
He dressed weird.
You know,
really
and
weird.
Jesus says, among those born of women, there was none like him. You know, he was a little weird. It's okay if, you know, you leave voicemails, Eli. Just don't lose that communication, those tools.
Well, I will tell you, because it doesn't stop usually. I mean, I cannot believe how many women that I speak to, that their husbands, grown men, spend hours gaming.
Yes.
And I sit there in my heart, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of gaming. Don't take me wrong, it's not a judgment thing.
Our
But-
camera guys are out there laughing now
They're
because they're
laughing, I know.
gaming.
Sorry,
I hear
guys.
you guys.
See, I'm always the meddler. But, you know, I just think that there's, and same with women, you know, we got to be careful not living our life on that Facebook. I think
Right.
if we're not careful, it's what I tell my children. This is my statement to them all the time. There's a real life out here,
Yes.
and it's passing you all by.
Right.
It's just passing you, and you could be out having fun, experiencing it, having fun with your friends.
So what do you do?
Well, it's like today. It's like first thing I said when I got up this morning is, guys, 1 hour. That's all we get, and then
Yes.
we're out. You know, you've got reading.
Good.
I believe that we have to be out. We're outdoor people, anyways. I mean, obviously, I'm married to an outdoorsman, but you know, I enjoy it. I like to be out taking a walk, or going biking, or swimming, or pulling my weeds, or just let's get out and live life. But I think as parents, it starts with us. You've got to. You're the one controlling your children. And I told my husband yesterday.
Boundaries.
That's
it's
right.
so easy to put your kids in front of those computers because they're quiet, they're there, and it's a great cheap babysitter. But man, the price that we're going to pay in the end, that's what you got to ask. Is you might win this, but you might win the battle, but you ain't going to win the war. And I think we have to think further down the line of. And I like what you said. I don't want to go with culture. The Bible says that we are peculiar people. And, you know, that whole thing about being relevant, I say it all the time. I don't want to be relevant because my Bible is still relevant. It is still truth, and it is still life.
Yes.
And I tell people, you keep trying your way. I'm not here to judge you. But when you get tired, when it stops working, come talk to me. Because
When it makes you empty.
when it makes you empty, because it's not that our life is perfect, but boy, there's so much hope and so much peace that comes with this life.
We
you
just
know?
went on vacation and we went to Georgia, to the mountains and everything. And my daughter's 20, okay? So everything is, you know, this. And my
But
daughter
see,
was
I
like,
know about that
take
because
my
I
picture
saw
here,
you.
take my selfie here. Oh, yes. Oh,
I
you
saw you
my
on
whole
Facebook.
trip,
I know
right?
your whole vacation.
Yes,
But
and
that's
I kept
great.
saying, Sarah, I was like, honey, hike. Don't take a picture of the hike. You know, I was like, oh my goodness. I said to my mom, I go, I am in better shape than these millennials. I realized, they were all like, and I'm like thinking it was just, I don't know if it's just they do shorter bouts of exercise or something. I don't know, but I was like
Interesting.
thinking it was, I'm like, look around, take deep breaths. You don't have to be looking down all the time. Look out, lift your eyes to the hills.
See life through the real, not through the camera screen.
You can't make it that pretty through the screen. Have you ever tried to like take pictures of God's sunsets and his sunrises and you're like, yeah, that's nothing compared to what I'm looking at. You're just like, you cannot recreate what God's done. And it's like, if we can get our eyes off this and get it back
And
up to
honestly,
him.
if we put our phones away, like I think about when I go to dinner, I usually have my phone, if I'm out to dinner, have it sitting here, or someone else has their phone sitting on the table. You know, we grew up in a time where there were no cell phones. Like if someone couldn't reach you, they just couldn't reach you. The babysitter's going to know what to do. She's going to be all right. I can go a few hours without, what's going on? You know, but they do say you get a hit of dopamine every time a text message comes in.
Really?
And that's why we
like it.
are
I didn't know
addicted.
that.
Like on Facebook.
We're addicted, yes. Anytime there are studies, and that's why, I mean, that's another topic for another show, but
That's
there's
good.
a real like
Addictions.
addictive quality to all of it because of the chemical influence it has. But we can talk about that another time.
That'd be another great show, because we are addicted to feeling good. We want to feel good. We want to help people see our vacations. We want to help see, but we're not connecting like we used to connect. And so my concern is that for my grandchildren, we don't know, Carolyn, like you said, what it's going to be like in 20 or 30 years. How are these kids going to be raising their kids? You know, we just don't know.
We better start now. I mean, I keep saying it to all of my friends, you know, the responsibility is not in my pastor's hands, it's not in my school teacher's hands, it's right here.
Yeah.
It is in my responsibility realm that I have got to pour into these children the things of Christ.
Right.
And
establishing those boundaries.
Yeah.
Right.
Helping
And there
them.
will continue to be lots of trends and lots of changes in our lives, the way we speak, the way we dress, the things that we read, all of the things we watch on television. There will always be changes. But what does the Bible have to say about that?
Well,
Mo, I know you know.
I was just thinking about Romans 12:2, and it just says, don't conform anymore to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You know, these things are
so
great.
good.
Social media, phones, all of technology, it's wonderful. TV is amazing. But we can't conform to the patterns of this world. We've got to let God's word transform us.
Thank you, ladies. Appreciate you. There's so much more that we could have talked about, because there are so many trends and changes. But the main thing, and I guess our word of encouragement for you today, is to think about these trends. Which ones are drawing you to Jesus and which ones are taking you away? Because listen, one thing stays the same, and that's Jesus. Hebrews 13:8 says Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And that's what we need to be conformed to. Not the patterns of this world, but to Jesus. Allow the cultural trends to happen, because they're going to happen. Don't embrace all of them. Some of them we have to embrace, but stay true to our Jesus. He is the same forever. Stay with us, because we have more coming up.
Coming up next.
So much of what I think my generation lives off of is not very substantial, right? It's tweetable. It's it's an Instagram story or something like that. I'm talking as one myself, right? But substantial truth, a Christ that when He's lifted up draws all people to Himself. That's, I think, the thing that really attracts millennials.
You're watching Barbara Beck on Welcome Home, where we share life-changing stories filled with hope. You're watching Welcome Home, bringing you life-changing stories filled with hope.
Thanks so much for joining us today for our discussion on cultural trends. What is biblically aligned and what is culturally driven? The difference between being maybe a cultural Christian versus a biblical Christian? Well, I know you're going to enjoy our lively and informed group of pastors today as they help us navigate some of these murky waters and even help us see what is dangerous and what is simply part of natural change and evolution. Well, with us today, we have four very distinguished guests and members of our Good Life 45 Hope team, and I'm super honored to introduce them to you today. We are blessed to have all of you gentlemen here today. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Love having you. First of all, Dr. Joel Hunter, thank you. Joel
glad
used to be
here.
pastor at Northland, a church distributed, but now tell everybody what you do.
I work with marginalized people, mostly homeless, in our region.
And thank you for doing that. That is a great ministry that God has moved you out of a fantastic ministry into an even more impactful one, if I may say
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
so much. And then Pastor Benjamin Cant from New City Church. Thank you, Ben, for being here with us today.
So glad to be here.
Have to tell a little bit about your background.
Sure.
Because my daughter and son-in-law go to New City, where Dr. Damien, well, he's not a doctor yet, but he's so
Getting
close.
there. I call him Dr. D all the time.
Dr.
so,
D,
yeah,
Dr.
that's
Damien
right.
Sheeter, he is the senior pastor there and does a wonderful job, and you were right in there helping him, so thank you for all that you do.
Yeah.
And being willing to be the baby on the panel.
That's right.
Our young boy up here with us, appreciate. And then Dr. Marvin Jackson, we love you. You have been a part of our Hope team for so many years and preaching every single day on Good Life 45. Do you remember the times that you're on the air here?
6:30 in the morning
Yes,
and
sir.
7 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's
Through Friday.
right. And then what time would your services be there at River of Life Christian
10
Center?
o'clock a.m. every Sunday morning, Thursday during the week at 7.
And I have been to your church, and I can testify, viewers, he is a fantastic preacher. Well, I've seen you on the air too, but I love being there in person because we get the music and the whole experience, and your beautiful wife, Deborah, up there talking too. So thank you for what you're doing for the kingdom.
Thank you for having us.
You are awesome. And then a brand new pastor on Good Life 45, Pastor Jason Height from the Lakeside Church in Oakland. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
And you are airing when? Do you remember your times?
We're on Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. and then we're on Tuesday nights at 9:30
That is
p.m.
great. And then what time are your services at the Lakeland Church?
We have 4 worship experiences on the weekend at 8:30, 10 o'clock, 11:30, and then we have a Spanish service that we've just started at 2 o'clock.
Oh, habla español?
Sí.
Oh,
un
wow.
poquito.
I did not know
Un
that.
poquito.
Very good. Well, listen, viewers, I just have to tell you, if you don't have a church home, you have at least 3 churches with pastors right here that would love to have you. They will embrace you. They'll love on you. And then if you want to get involved with a homeless ministry, here's your guy, right? Absolutely. Okay, so what we're going to do today, gentlemen, is to start talking about cultural trends. There's so much going on in our culture today, and it's hard to keep up, hence the baby on the panel. Had to have the baby, and the baby's older brother over here as well. But what I want you to do, I'm just going to kind of start off with going around the table and saying, what is a cultural trend that you can identify in your own personal lives that has impacted you? It might be lighthearted, it might be silly, it might be funny, but I want our viewers to be thinking too. Think about what's been going on in the culture that's really kind of affected you in an odd kind of way. What about you, Joel?
When we talk about biblical Christianity, I want to make, for myself, a difference between those who come armed with Scripture and theology that will immediately put somebody else on the defensive, and the Jesus that we fix our eyes on, that just looked at people, no matter where they were, and tried to get close to those people. After
8 meals with them too.
yeah,
right?
he made his way to them and loved them just for who they were. When Pulse happened, I became aware of just how few people in the LGBTQ community I even knew. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. There's a whole section of our community that are obviously vulnerable in certain ways, and I'm not even connected. And so I got to know some pastors and some other people, and I'm just crazy about them. I love them. I don't preoccupy myself with their sexual activity because I just want to know them as people, and all of those conversations will come up as we get to know each other better as friends. But that's not the first thing I want to talk about to somebody.
Exactly.
You said something we're seen as either with us or against us when it comes to sexuality in the LGBT community. During the biblical days, there was a feast day, I think it was, and a group of men, I think they came to Philip, and they said, "Sirs, we would see Jesus. We'd like to see Jesus." I think that question is still relevant today. And a lot of people that are not are part of us, who feel they're not a part of us. They don't want to see the lights. They don't want to see the congregation. They want to see Jesus and how Jesus loved. And I think that's where sometimes we fall short, because when you look at how Jesus loved, take the woman that was caught in the act of adultery, and you had the religious establishment who wanted her to be stoned. And you talked about how comfortable Jesus was with the publicans and sinners. They mocked him, and they said, oh, he loves them. And, well, they loved him too, because they felt comfortable with him, because he wasn't coming to condemn them. Even with the woman that was caught with in the act of adultery, after everything was done, he said, woman, where are thine accusers? And she looked up and she said, I have none. And Jesus was standing there too. And so he was saying, I'm not accusing you either. But then he says this, he says, go your way and sin no more. Right. But to just come up with a Bible and to beat someone over the head, because of my position in your sexuality, that's wrong, because you can't catch fish throwing rocks in the water. And the Bible says we're fishers of men. And I made the statement at the church, you are welcome. Everybody's welcome. I don't care how you come. I don't care what you dress, because I just believe in the transforming power of the love of God. We just teach the word, and whatever happens, we'll just let it happen. But you have to train your church and create a culture in your church so that church people don't run non-church people, or people that don't look like them, dress like them, think like them, because you're preaching love, but you've got a greeter that's, well, what are you doing?
A relevant question, Marvin, in that story is, where was the guy? Where was the guy involved?
Yeah, right.
This is the woman is being persecuted and prosecuted for that act. There was a guy involved, and it reminds me of the church. We focus on those outcasts that are easy to pick on, but people in the church are doing the same stuff. And where's the guy?
Dr. Hunter, I got another good question. How did they catch him?
Yeah.
That's another great, right? I mean, who was the peeping Tom?
Somebody's watching.
The same religious, anyways.
It said, run, boy. The guy got run, so you're not in on this.
I'll share this. We'll move on with this. I heard an old preacher preach one time. He was a Baptist preacher. And, the story goes that Jesus was writing in the sand during the whole time this dialogue was going on. Yeah. And he said, could it be that he was writing down the names of men that had either been with the woman before or wanted to be with her but never had the opportunity? Because the story goes that they left from the oldest to the youngest. Yeah. So maybe God looked over and saw his name and said, okay, I'll just leave the situation alone.
That's good. That's good. Let's go to a sort of I don't want to completely leave this subject, because this kind of ties into, if we talk about where the church is headed. Now, church attendance is down, apparently. I don't know all the research on that, but is one of the reasons that people, postmodernism people, the millennials, are they leaving church because of some of these things, that we're not embracing everybody? Are we not as loving as we should be? Are we not looking at the holistic person? Where's the church headed as a cultural trend, and why, do you suppose?
Go ahead. I might just add, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I went to church, there was the adult service on Sunday, there was the student service on Wednesday. There was a separation. And so the youth could do, I know, like on Wednesday night, we could do a little bit different style worship that we couldn't do on Sunday morning, but we could do on Wednesday night. At least that's how it was in the church that I grew up in. And so the youth ministry, the adult ministry was separated. What happens with a system like that is that when you graduate high school and you're now out of the youth ministry, you're not a part of the adult ministry on Sunday morning. And I think that's just one maybe cause of that issue going on. One thing we've done as a church is we say we don't have a student ministry, we are a student ministry. Good. So on Sunday morning, our students are a part of everything that we do. They're serving, they're greeting, they're singing, and I think that it creates more of a connectivity for the students to what the church is doing. And when they graduate high school, they're not graduating their faith.
The greatest sermon and the greatest experience I've ever had as a preacher was not in a large facility talking to thousands of people, but it was in a refugee camp in Dadaab that we talked about. We pulled up there in the heat of the day in Nairobi, out in the desert. It was so hot. And I was like, Jesus, please let somebody have like just some cold water somewhere. So we pull up, and there's people everywhere, and they break out into dance and festivities, and we go into this church, and there's no windows
and it's a tin roof. Oh, it's hot. And we walk in, and there's a chorus of little girls that start singing, and I just wept. It was just, that place was packed. But now, here, we've got live streaming, we've got AC, we've got cry rooms, we've got parking attendants, and we sometimes we make it easier for people to stay home. They say, well, I'll just stay home and I'll live stream the service. It becomes a matter of convenience. And it's amazing how you see demonstrations of the Spirit in cultures where people walk through rain. You know, it's not a matter of them getting a ride or having something to dress. They just want Jesus. That's all they want. And now, with our culture here in the U.S., if you pull up and you can't get your favorite parking spot, or you can't get what you consider to be your seat at church, you get offended. And personally speaking, I think our churches have become, especially the larger churches, personality driven. They come to see the guy that they see on TV, or they're not coming for Jesus anymore.
Yeah, right.
And so if the pastor's not there, well, I'll just stay home this Sunday. You know, I'll wait until the pastor gets back. And I don't know if we're to blame for creating these personalities and not be pointing people to Jesus. Because in my pastor circles, one of the things we talk about is how do we attract millennials?
Yeah.
So we changed the lighting, we changed the way that we do service, we changed music. But then Jesus said this. He said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men, which must mean millennials and everything else. So apparently, if we would just lift more of Jesus up, we wouldn't have to worry about special programs to attract a special demographic of people. At least that's my little take on that.
Well, Marvin, I like where you started with that too, which is when we start talking about the church, we want to realize that we're talking about a global body, right? A global community of followers of Jesus, and the church is doing fine, right? It's been doing fine. It will always do fine because Jesus said, "I will build my church."
Yes.
And so I think when we start looking at numbers and statistics, especially in the West, it gets discouraging. And I think it's good to go back to the fact that the church is doing great. Now, the church in the West, the church in the U.S. in particular. When I hear stories or even read books about reaching millennials, it's always funny to me as a millennial. I think the representative millennial on the panel here. It's like the story of the two fish that pass themselves or pass each other in the water, and one says to the other, "How's the water?" and the other says, "What's water?" Right? Like as a millennial, I don't get what that is because I'm just like, this is my people. You know, these are who I belong to. But I was drawn to Jesus through people that were willing to talk about truth and willing to talk about things that are actually substantial. Because so much of what I think my generation lives off of is not very substantial, right? It's tweetable. It's it's an Instagram story or something like that. I'm talking as one myself, right? But substantial truth. A Christ that, when He's lifted up, draws all people to Himself. That's, I think, the thing that really attracts millennials.
There's a part also, even from my generation. My generation had a loyalty to institutions. You know, the church was an institution. You go to church because that's what you do. This generation says, no, give me something that means something.
Right.
Give me something that makes a difference.
Right.
And then I will go to that assembly. I'm not drawn to the huge presentation because I see huge presentations all over the place.
That's right.
But even in my generation, you know, Orlando is I think statistically either the number one or close to the top of the percentage of people who have dropped out of church in every generation. And because it just became habit, it became something you do, and none of us are just into another activity. We're all way too busy. And so therefore, if it's not centered on growing my relationship with Christ and growing more Christ-like myself, something that's really going to impact me so that I impact others, then I'm really going to question whether or not I'm going to put a lot of effort into that. Now, thankfully, you're right, Barbara. The established church is having a real challenge right now. There's it's a lower church attendance, especially mega churches, having a difficult time. These three are growing. You know, they're exceptions. But that doesn't mean that the form of church needs to determine whether or not the church grows. The church is the assembly of God's people for the worship of Christ and the working out of His mission. And so no matter how that's arranged, that's how we need to think of the church. And so the church is taking forms these days that aren't readily recognized by the institutional generation, but it's still the church.
And it's okay, because what I'm thinking, and I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, millennials, Jason and Ben, is that you guys want real and you want relevant. If it's not, and that's why we're talking about the LGBTQ, and that's why we're going to talk about race in a little bit, Marvin. And I think that that's what they want. They want authenticity. Back in our day, you respected authority no matter what. Millennials have come up and they've seen that authority sometimes lies, and authority is not all.
Authority.
They will question authority where we would never dream of questioning authority. Hence a lot of the sexual abuse and things that went on. So I don't know where I'm going with that, other than hopefully, like you said, Joel, is that the church will continue to grow in the West. I'm talking about the Western world in particular, but it might not look the same that it's looked for the institutionalized church that we're used to.
Yeah, sure.
Millennials may not come to church, but they'll come and dig a well. They'll come and build a house for a homeless person. They'll come and build an orphanage. In other words, they want to see not the four walls and everything else. What do you do? I mean, how do you make Jesus come alive in your life? When we go on missions trips, the older people go, well, you guys never take us. I don't want to take you. I know exactly who I want to take, because one encounter like that can impact somebody's life to where their life is totally changed. And we live in this culture, we're entitled. We think certain things belong to us. You know, to have a phone. Everybody should have a cell phone, until you go to another country and you see people that don't have a cell phone, that don't have water, that don't have lights. It shines a whole nother light on who you are as an individual and what's my purpose. Why am I supposed to be here? And so I think what you're saying is right. They're getting away from the institution. Again, it goes back to, we would like to see Jesus. What would Jesus really, really do? You know?
About 3 years ago, I felt like God gave me a mandate. I really felt like God spoke to my heart about reaching the younger generation. I was aware of the statistics of them leaving the church after they leave high school. And so I began praying about how I could strategically reach that generation. And one of the things that we've done, you know, we've got 12, 13 members on staff. Half of them are under the age of 21. And one of the benefits of having these young guys, number one, they got way more energy than the rest of us. But if you want to reach young people, you need to have young leaders that you're raising up in the church to reach those young people. And that's been a blessing for us.
Let's talk just for a minute about, we've been talking about gender identity and confusion with all of that. Let's segue into race identity. Do you feel, Marvin, that sometimes there is a definite segregation on Sunday morning of African American churches, white churches, Asian churches? I mean, is that not kind of a truism that we're segregated on Sunday mornings? And if so, which I believe that's true, I've been visiting a lot of African American churches lately. Culturally, we worship differently in a lot of ways. So why is there that divide?
That's a good question, because, I mean, it's been said that 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in the United States. And we tend to come together with, I call it being cliquish. You know, there are cultural styles of ministry that one race might not be comfortable with. And sometimes, you know, it's really weird, because if you look at our viewership and the people that call, I get a lot of calls from white viewers, but they don't show up in church, but they'll call, you know. And it's very interesting, because the way I look at this, and this is probably an oversimplification of the whole thing, is if you take away the top 1/16 of an inch of our skin, we would all look the same. And so I think that the devil has done a good job of taking pigmentation and using something as simple as pigmentation to divide us. And so whenever we come, we're always better together. Whenever we become divided, we become effete, and we're not as effective as we ought to be, because we'll always be more powerful together. And so for years, it's been used to divide our country on so many different levels, not only in the church, but on political levels and everything else. I think that where we are now, I think we're more divided now.
I do too.
Culturally. I mean, everybody is so sensitive. I mean, if you push the wrong button, And I always have a lot of healthy dialogue on social media. Sometimes I have to just pull away from it, you know, because you just get into what you're saying, and it's a problem. And I don't know if it'll ever go away. I really don't. And I mean, even from the way that I teach and the way that I do ministry, I mean, culturally, if you look back at Afro-American churches, it's exciting, it's bombastic, it's very demonstrative. I just stand up and teach and talk, you know, and that's what I've always done.
See, but I think we can learn from different people's styles of worship too. I love, and I told them this at a recent church that I went to that was African-American, we old people, old white people, can learn a lot about how to worship from a black service where they are dancing in the aisles and they are responding and engaging. I mean, I was exhausted because I was engaged. I was part of the service. But I think that's rich, and that's something, there's your word, balance. You know, we can learn from them, they can learn from us, and we definitely don't need to be segregated on Sunday mornings.
Well, and you use the word learn, and it's not lost on me that the word Jesus uses to call his disciples, mathetes, is learner, right? And so a core identity, to go back to that language, is of a follower of Jesus is a learner. And I think in this conversation regarding any dividing wall of hostility, Ephesians 2 says, anything along those lines, we need to be postured as learners towards one another. And so I'll sit with clients of mine as a counselor, and we'll be in middle of a conversation, and they'll say something, and then they'll see probably an expression on my face like, I don't get what you're talking about, and they'll say, oh, that's my Hispanic family, and so when I hear that, I'm like, thank you for bringing me in on that, because I don't know that, and it's really helpful for me to hear that from you, and so I've got hopefully this environment that I'm creating of, I want to learn from you because I don't expect that I know what you're talking about off the bat.
That goes not just in race relations. That goes. Our country right now is so polarized in every sense, politically and regionally, and you know, all affinity groups are kind of imploding and counting everybody else. We all kind of have this middle school mentality. We all define ourselves by who we hate, you know, and who's not like us, who's not in our group, you know, and we kind of get stuck there. But there is this, you know, this scriptural phrase, having a teachable spirit, wanting to learn, wanting to understand, because somehow that's going to make me increased in my appreciation of God and what He's created.
Right, and you are not going to understand a gay person if you don't have a gay friend. I loved how you said that. Yeah. I'm not going to understand you and your culture, Marvin, if I don't go to your church and I don't get to know you. And there's so many other examples of that. It's all about relationships. You know, Jesus related to everybody. He sat down and ate, like you said, Ben, with everybody. Marvin?
But you know what? The problem goes all the way back to the disciples in the first century church. If you look at what was happening with Peter, you know, he had to go to meet this man called Cornelius, but before that, if you look at the backstory, you know, he's up on the rooftop, I think he was fasting, you know, and the sheet, he sees in the trance, he sees the sheet come down with all manner of beasts that are unclean and clean. And the Spirit of God begins to deal with him, and he said, I've never eaten anything ceremonially unclean. And God said, how dare you call something that I've made clean unclean? And the next thing you know, he hears a knock at the door. and he perceives, because really it was a knock on his heart. That was God knocking on his heart. Good. And he goes to Cornelius' house. And if he hadn't gone to Cornelius' house, because the original command was this, go ye into Judea, Jerusalem, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the world. The only thing they heard was Jerusalem and Judea. They didn't hear Samaria because they didn't have anything to do with Samaria. And it was strange the way this thing happened, because everything was happening in Jerusalem. You know, you had the miracles, you had the lame man that was jumping up, 3,000 people being saved, 9 o'clock in the morning, one service. They were having a ball until persecution broke out in the church. And then when persecution, it's funny how God can get you to where He wants you to be. And when persecution broke out, then they were scattered abroad. They became the diaspora. And they had to deal with that in the first century church. As a matter of fact, Paul and Peter had a confrontation, Because Paul said, listen, the way you behave around this group of believers and the way you behave around this group of believers is totally different. And he called them on the carpet about it. So this issue that we're dealing with about cultural differences and racial differences and religious differences, it's as old as the church itself.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Something I think we need to figure out, because when we get to heaven, I have this sense that there won't be the white
Right.
church and the Asian church and the Spanish church.
Your skin might not even be white. Yeah.
I'm going to be tall.
You are already.
My new spiritual body is tall.
You already are in my eyes.
Bless you.
I think it goes to some intentionality too with the culture. You know, we create the culture of our church, and what we're trying to do is create a culture of oneness, of unity. And so, from the very beginning of our church, we said, hey, we're going to be multi-generational. We're going to be multi-denominational. We're not going to exclude folks based on those things, and we're going to be multi-ethnic.
Good.
And so there was intentionality there again. And so I think whatever you want to be, your number one, your leadership has to represent that. If you're a white church with all white pastors and you want to reach the African American community, it's probably not going to happen.
Right.
Or if you're an African American church and you want to reach the white community, but you don't have any white pastor, so that there's an importance there that your leadership represents the type of church that you're wanting to grow.
Which is why you have young people on your leadership.
Praise God.
Okay, I got one more quick question because we're almost out of time. I'm going to start with Ben. Huh?
It's gone already?
Already, yes. We could do this for hours. What bugs you most about old people, Ben?
And don't worry that I'm sitting right beside you. Don't
Yeah, here, we'll sit over here. No, but about our culture, about the way the culture is going. What is the most annoying thing to you? And then maybe we can all have 30 seconds to answer that.
Yeah. So if I understand the question, trying to be political
Be
here.
careful, yes.
You're asking me about what bothers me the most about the culture. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that, again, as I said before,
That was the question.
again,
He's so politically correct.
yeah, that's
good,
right.
Ben.
I'm going to detour around that one.
That's good.
So,
Good job.
yeah, again, when I talk about the culture, I want to define that with me included. And so when I say the thing that bugs me the most about the culture is probably the lack of awareness of how technology is shaping us, right? Technology is this incredible thing that we shape it, but then we forget that it turns around and shapes us.
Good
And so
point.
I'm conscious of that myself and becoming more conscientious of when I put my phone to sleep at night and wanting it to be a couple hours before I go to sleep at night. And so that's, I think, a big thing for me.
You know, you guys are just awesome. I wish we had more time. We really don't. But I just want to thank Dr. Joel Hunter for being here with us today. Ben Kent, you are awesome as well. And Dr. Marvin Jackson, love having you on here. Pastor Jason Height. You guys, honestly, we could do this every week, and we probably should, because there are a lot of things that we haven't talked about, what we wear to church, what our language is. There's so many other things that we could talk about. But here's the bottom line, and I want our viewers to be sure that they hear this today, is that yes, culture is going to change. It continues to change. But guess what? Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Did you hear these guys? They amened me. Oh, I love it. I love it. So thanks so much for being here, for being part of our discussion today. We don't want the discussion to stop here. We want you to continue to talk about it at home, and maybe this will spark some interest in helping you understand each other. And again, been a wonderful, rich time. Thanks so much to all of our pastors here today. Thank you to you for joining us, and stay with us. We have a little bit more coming up.
Moments with Mo.
I gotta admit, I'm not a big fan of change. But whether I like change or not, the truth is, this life here on earth is all about change. I've heard it said, the only thing that never changes is everything changes. Social trends and cultural trends here on earth are inevitable. I mean, it seems like the second I actually start knowing how to maneuver through my smartphone, it's time for some update to happen, it all looks different, and I'm lost again. I'm kind of an old-fashioned girl. The truth is, I'd really rather pet a horse than download a picture of a horse and post it with some fun hashtag. And I'd rather hike a mountain than play a virtual reality game where I'm climbing Mount Everest without ever having to get out of my jammies. Yes, there are so many cultural trends that change every day, and it's sometimes hard for me to keep up with, or quite honestly even want to. Being a mom, I can tell by how out of it I am when I see my kids' eyes roll and they shake their heads like, "Mom, really?" Well, if there's anyone else out there like me who struggles with this, let me encourage you with something today. Guess what? Our God never changes. Never, no, never. His beautiful, perfect, alive, and breathing word doesn't change. His commands never change. Oh, come on, y'all. I'm preaching myself happy now. Yes, Malachi 3:6 says, "I, the Lord, do not change." Friends, He's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. He's perfect and flawless and holy and glorious. So why would He need to change? God's word is as alive today and applicable to our lives as it was thousands of years ago. Every one of the 66 books in the Word are written to stand the test of time and to help every tribe, every tongue, every generation, and every culture find their way to life eternal in Jesus Christ. God's persona doesn't change. God is love. He always will be love. You can't stop God from loving. It's who He is. It's His being. His love is truly perfect. God is perfect love. Oh, friends, this is comforting, isn't it? Yes, though culture seems to change every day, things we think will always be seem to fade under the ideas and inventions of tomorrow. We have a lasting comfort and peace in knowing that our God never changes. He's still on His throne, He's still ruling and reigning, and He's preparing a place for us in glory someday. Oh yes, heaven, where the gates are pearly white and the streets are paved in gold. Oh friends, let me tell you, that place, heaven, that'll need no updates. For more on renewing your mind in the Word of God, visit us at Unforsaken Women or check out our website, unforsakenwomen.com.
I'm so glad you joined us today. I hope and pray that you got a lot out of the discussion on cultural trends and how even when the culture clashes with our beliefs, we can remain steadfast and faithful as Christ's followers. There will always be changes in our culture. Just think back to our grandparents and how they probably had a hard time accepting some of the things which we see as commonplace today. Imagine their struggle going from horse-drawn carriages to gasoline-powered monstrosities known as automobiles. Ridiculous to think of life without cars. Or how about going from electric typewriters to computers? That was hard for me to accept. I couldn't imagine anything being faster than an electric typewriter. Boy, was I ever wrong. So many changes are good, making us more efficient, better capable of connecting with people and places. But our challenge is to identify which cultural changes are good for us and our families and which are destructive. The Bible is very clear about something that will never be affected by cultural trends and changes, and that's our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's from Hebrews 13, verse 8. And along with that is the truth that our need for Him will never change. We need to avoid a collision course between God's truth and our culture. What do we do to not adapt our beliefs and behaviors to what is not Christian culture, but rather to adapt to what is going on, which is biblical? I think we would be wise to re-examine our lives in light of all the changes around us and make sure we are living as biblical Christians and not cultural, trendy kind of Christians. There's a big difference, and we have to be careful to live as Scripture teaches us and not as cultural trends demand. And that, dear friends, is our note of hope for today. Thanks so much for joining us, and God bless you.
You just watched Welcome Home with Barbara Beck, a Good Life 45 original production. That makes you a part of our Hope team here on Good Life 45, where hope happens.